Billionaire secretly tracks his daughter's nanny. What he discovered will move you to tears. Thomas Westbrook stared out the massive windows of his penthouse office, the San Francisco skyline shimmering against the sun, reflecting his empire. Yet, beneath the surface gleamed a bitterness stirring inside him. He had all the wealth a man could ever need, but instead of contentment, a void persisted, the gaping chasm that had formed between him and his daughter, Lily. At 15, she distanced herself, retreating into her world of art while he remained shackled to the exhilarating machinery of wealth and recognition. On Sundays, while the neighborhood families gathered for brunches and parties to toast success and connections, the Westbrook mansion felt lifeless. The laughter of his affluent friends echoed through the corridors, while his own daughter's silence throbbed like an open wound. She poured her heart into canvases and poems, desperately seeking solace from the cold, financial grandeur that surrounded them. To Thomas, this was a problem easily solvable. He could buy her everything, swirl her in luxury. But the fragments of their relationship eluded his grasp, costing him more than all his investments. Desperate, he turned to hiring Gina, a feisty single mother from a working-class neighborhood, to look after Lily. In his mind, she was merely a caretaker, another expense in his sprawling ledger, someone to keep his daughter occupied while he conquered boardrooms. But he began feeling an unease as he watched their interactions unfold through the edges of his corporate shield. The laughter he overheard, the spontaneous art sessions, and spirited debates felt foreign and intrusive. Gina's warmth was an invitation to a world he had shut out. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Yet, the more he observed, the deeper the turmoil within him festered. Was he truly the man he believed himself to be? The fierce protector turned into a lurking shadow, consumed by jealousy, a feeling he hadn't experienced since his cutthroat corporate beginnings. As he found himself scrolling through articles that exposed Gina's painful past, the teenage years filled with struggles and sacrifices, his sharp judgment faced brutal introspection. Was he in a position to understand resilience when his own identity was cloaked in money? In moments of reckless thought, a question gnawed at him. What kind of father was he? The walls of his luxurious prison began cracking, revealing the hollowness he feared. Could he really comprehend the emotional landscape of his daughter's heart, woven tightly by threads of pain and longing? As he waged war against his own defensiveness, he realized the fortress he'd built was insubstantial, his daughter slipping further away with every attempt to control the growing distance. The emotional pressure boiled within him, as the realization loomed larger. If he remained buried in his wealth, he risked losing not just Lily, but himself in the process. In her search for connection, could there still be a flicker of hope? The thought reverberated painfully, weaving threads of uncertainty through the very fabric of his existence, leaving readers to wonder. Would he take the plunge and bridge that chasm, or continue to sink in silence while watching his world and Lily's shatter around him? Thomas paced restlessly in his office, his sharp heels echoing on the polished hardwood floors. The artifacts of his success surrounded him, framed deals, glistening awards, and the unsmiling faces of business partners, but they felt increasingly like reminders of his failures. He could close every deal with ease, but faced an insurmountable wall when it came to connecting with Lily. Thoughts swirled through his mind. He couldn't shake off the image of her vibrant laughter replacing the sterile silence that filled their home. He needed a plan, an approach that didn't involve leveraging his wealth. When had success become synonymous with indifference? The realization hit him with a force he hadn't anticipated. For years, he had chased every opportunity, ensuring that his empire thrived while neglecting the only familial bond that mattered. Money couldn't buy time, nor could it substitute emotional presence. Thomas pulled out his phone, hesitating before tapping Gina's number. A mundane interaction had transformed into an unpredictable element of his life. It was time to confront his discomfort rather than hide behind it. Maybe it was time to meet this woman whose presence became more than a mere convenience. His heart raced with anxiety, mixed with a twinge of excitement. After all, what had she uncovered about his daughter that he hadn't? "Gina, can we meet? I want to discuss how things are going with Lily," he said, when she answered, his voice laced with an urgency he rarely allowed himself to feel. "Sure, Mr. Westbrook. When?" "Now. I'll send a car." The ride to the cafe felt interminable, each second amplifying his inner turmoil. Would she see through his facade? He couldn't shake the sensation that in seeking insight about Lily's world, he might also uncover truths about himself he wasn't entirely ready to face. As he entered the cafe, he spotted her at a corner table, bright and unassuming. The casual air around her felt strangely liberating compared to his polished yet stifling lifestyle. She looked up, recognition mingling with a hint of apprehension in her eyes. "Mr. Westbrook," she greeted, her tone cautious yet warm. "Gina, thank you for meeting me." He settled into the seat across from her, searching for the right words, battling the instinct to offer financial solutions. "How is she doing?" Gina's expression softened. "Lily is passionate, Mr. Westbrook, but she feels isolated. I can't know everything, but I sense her pain. She wants to be heard and seen, not just cared for." His heart sank at her words, the weight of his neglect pressing down like a lead blanket. "And what do you suggest?" The question came out softer than he anticipated, revealing the vulnerability that had become his shadow. "Listen to her, not just to her words, but to her emotions. Don't rush to fix things. Be present." "Present," he echoed, scrawling the word in his mind. It sounded deceptively simple, yet challenged him profoundly. Perhaps his greatest strength, his wealth, had become a weakness where intimacy was concerned. As they discussed Lily's art, dreams, and vulnerabilities, a glimmer of understanding sparked within him. Each moment spent listening dismantled pieces of the rigid walls he had erected over the years. He realized how far removed he had been from caring for someone beyond transactional terms. After Gina left, Thomas wandered the city streets, absorbing sights and sounds he had long ignored. The world was alive, and he felt shockwaves of awakening within him. What would living a life that embraced emotional vulnerability look like? The question unsettled him, but became a guiding star. The journey ahead was daunting, fraught with potential failures, yet he felt a flicker of determination rise in his chest. Returning home, he found Lily in her room, surrounded by chaotic strokes of paint and paper scattered like scattered thoughts. The urge to turn away reappeared, but he fought it. He couldn't just stand by. He had to act. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice unsteady yet hopeful. Her hesitant nod felt like both a challenge and an opening. What lay ahead was unknown territory, littered with the potential for misunderstanding, but also the opportunity for connection. The moment hung in the air, thick with unspoken feelings and possibilities. Yet doubt lingered. What if he stumbled again? Yet amidst the uncertainty, the belief began to form that maybe, just maybe, this would be the moment he decided to truly turn toward his daughter's world. As he stepped inside, ready to start the conversation, another thought struck him. Was he prepared to confront the truths lying dormant in their hearts? Or would the chasm widen further? With that uncertainty hanging thickly, it became clear. He would need to summon all his courage for the path that lay ahead. Thomas took a deep breath as he crossed the threshold into Lily's room. The vibrant colors of her artwork danced on the walls, a stark contrast to the muted tones of his corporate environment. The air crackled with unexpressed emotions, and for the first time in years, he felt like an intruder in his own home. He'd always prided himself on being a decision-maker in the business realm, but parenting was a different, more intricate landscape, one where strategies and spreadsheets offered no guidance. "Hey, Dad," Lily said, her voice tentative. The painting brush she held hung in midair, poised over a canvas that bore the imprint of her soul. "Hey, Lily, I was wondering if we could talk about things," he said, feeling awkward as the words left his lips. He scanned the room, searching for something to latch onto as a conversation starter. But everything felt too personal, too exposed. "I don't know what you want to talk about," she replied, her tone edged with suspicion. "About your art, and how you've been feeling," he ventured, striving to sound casual, but his heart pounded in his chest. Would it be enough? She lowered her gaze to the floor, immediately retreating behind layers of protective silence. "I'm fine," she mumbled, dismissing the invitation to engage. "Lily," his voice caught, forcing him to reach deeper. I met with Gina. She mentioned you felt alone lately." The mention of Gina quickened Lily's eyes, flashing with a mix of anger and confusion. "So, you're checking up on me? Is that it?" "No," he urged, feeling the familiar sting of defensiveness rising. "I'm trying to understand. I don't want to fix anything. I just want to hear you." "Why now?" she countered, frustration seeping into her voice as she finally set the brush down. "You spend all your time working. I'm just an afterthought to you, Dad." Her words struck him like a punch. If his wealth had insulated him from emotional connections, this was the crack that the ice had started to form, the fracture revealing the truth of his inadequacy. "I know I haven't been fully here, but I want to change that," he replied, his voice steadier as he fought through the fog of hurt and resentment. "What does that even mean?" she shot back, crossing her arms defensively. "How can you be present when you don't even know who I am?" The weight of her challenge hung heavily in the air. How could she even begin to fathom the complexity of his own struggles? The barriers he had erected around his heart were becoming increasingly translucent. "You're right. I don't know you as I should. But I want to. I want to learn," he confessed, each word dropping like breadcrumbs to lead back to her. Lily's gaze softened momentarily, but the walls weren't down just yet. "You're so good at business, Dad. But life isn't a negotiation. It's messy. And I'm a mess," she said, tears pooling in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. He felt a swell of empathy, no longer just wishing to fix her, but desperate to embrace her chaos. "Being a mess is okay," he said gently. "I'm learning that it's part of being real, part of growing." In that moment, he recognized the truth. They were both navigating their own tangles of inadequacy. "Real?" she echoed, skepticism lining her face. "Then be real with me. Why did you focus more on your job than us?" He had anticipated this question, but confronting it was an entirely different story. "I thought success was what would make you proud," Thomas admitted, searching for the right way to frame his regret without cloaking it in justifications. "I thought that by building a future for us, I could ensure we'd be okay." "But I wanted you, not the future," she said, her voice soft but piercing with clarity. In that moment, the truth clawed at him, raw and undeniable. He had overlooked the very essence of what it meant to be a father. It wasn't about providing. It was about presence. Sitting there with Lily, he suddenly felt the enormity of the path ahead. He had ventured into unknown territory, and the fear of making additional missteps loomed, but so did the sliver of hope. If change was possible, it started with acceptance, of his flaws, of her reality, of the bond they needed to forge anew. "Can we start over?" he asked, vulnerability threading through his voice. Slowly, Lily's expression shifted. That hesitance began to crack. "Yeah, I'd like that, but it won't be easy," she replied, a flicker of determination igniting in her eyes. "I wouldn't want it any other way," he replied, drawing strength from her resolve. As they forged a tentative alliance that day, Thomas felt the swell of hope, intertwined with an unsettling reality. He was on the cusp of confronting not only his daughter's feelings, but his own deeper fears and vulnerabilities. And as they both stared at the chaotic masterpieces in her room, an unasked question danced in the air, beckoning like a siren song. What had they each been hiding beneath their layers of paint and persona? The moment seemed poised at the edge of transformation, yet understanding what lay beneath those exterior canvases would require them both to delve into the depths of their untapped emotions. Would they uncover truths capable of healing their fractured relationship? Or would they discover darkness lurking in the strokes of reality? The path forward was unclear, yet essential. The following days blended into a new routine for Thomas, one punctuated by an eagerness he had not anticipated. Facing his daughter meant confronting not only her emotions, but the specter of his own past choices. Each breakfast now came with a tentative exchange of thoughts, where silence was often filled with the clinking of forks, punctuating uncharted territory. "Have you thought about submitting to that art show?" he asked one morning, attempting to breach a subject Lily was passionate about. Lily looked up, eyebrows raised. "You remember that?" "Of course I do. I care," he replied, the words tasting foreign as they formed on his lips. "Was it true?" "Right," she said, skepticism creeping back into her tone. Yet, the edge was a touch softer than before. "You could always just come to support me, not just watch me succeed." Thomas contemplated her words like an investor sizing up a new venture. He needed to foster her creativity, not just acknowledge it. He felt an urge to tie his ambitions to hers, to nurture her art as he had his business. But how could he shift from a model of evaluation to one of genuine support? Drawing in a deep breath, he resolved to step into her art world fully. It meant casting aside the metrics of success he clung to so tightly. "What if I helped you prepare for the show? Set up the space or organize a showcase," he suggested, trepidation lacing his tone. Lily's gaze pierced him, as if assessing whether he was sincere or simply trapped by his own changeable nature. "Maybe," she replied noncommittally, but he could see that curiosity danced at the edge of her uncertainty. Outside of their tentative interactions, Thomas felt fissures in his work life stretching into vulnerability. His usual comfort in board meetings was disrupted by unexpected questions. Conversations began to shift from revenue targets to personal reflections of frustration and doubt among his colleagues, mirroring the very struggles he faced with Lily. One evening, after a long day filled with unanticipated debates on work-life balance, he met with Gina, Lily's nanny. They had exclusively discussed logistics and schedules before, but tonight was different. "So what's your plan? Keep burying your head in business? Or are you ready to face your daughter for real?" she asked, eyes sharp with challenge. "That's what I'm trying to do," he replied, feeling an uncomfortable knot form in his stomach. "But what if I fail?" "Failure is part of the process, Thomas. You've made plenty of mistakes in business, but you always adapt," Gina pointed out, crossing her arms. It struck him, her words reverberating like an echo in a cavern of self-doubt. Did he really treat this endeavor any differently? Why, then, was he paralyzed with the fear of failing as a father? "I've never had to navigate feelings like these," he admitted, almost to himself. "In business, it's straightforward. Numbers don't lie. People do." "And yet, you're surrounded by people every day," Gina said softly. "Lily isn't expecting perfection. She wants an authentic presence. That starts with you embracing the mess rather than calculating every move." Her insight echoed like the looming clock ticking against the wall. The moment of realization cracked open before him. He had been living by the metrics of success he had so painstakingly applied to his life, and it had made him blind to the subjective value of connection. Returning home, Thomas felt a newfound determination to dive deeper into this emotional landscape with Lily, to explore not just the art, but the heart behind it. The chaotic beauty of her expression resonated with the complexities he faced, layers of colors, struggles, triumphs, aspirations, all intertwined in the creation of something real. As he approached her room that evening, he realized the uncertainty loomed still. What awaited him in this new confrontation? Vulnerability, or deeper understanding? But he steeled himself. That question barely scratched the surface of what needed to be unearthed. With resolve coursing through him, he knocked on her door. "Lily, can I come in?" Silence stretched, but anticipation crackled in the air. And as the door creaked open, he braced himself, because together they needed to explore the unguarded brushstrokes of their realities, the raw canvas of their relationship, and address the truth they had both been hiding. And perhaps in this discovery, they could finally create something beautiful together. Lily's room was a refuge, adorned with vibrant canvases that spoke of her spirit more than any words could. The moment Thomas stepped inside, he was met with a rainbow of emotions flashing across her face. Surprise, anger, uncertainty, but also a hint of hope. It was a fragile moment, teetering on the edge of something profound. "Hi, Dad," she said cautiously, her eyes flickering to a half-finished painting that held the secrets of her creative struggles. "Hey," he replied, his voice wavering slightly. He hesitated, taking in the chaotic beauty surrounding him. Every brush stroke on the canvas resonated with the things left unsaid between them. "I just thought, maybe we could talk about your art?" Lily shrugged, but her posture softened. "Sure. What do you want to know? How do you feel about the upcoming show?" He purposefully avoided framing it with judgment or expectations, instead treating her passion with the respect it deserved. Her brow furrowed as she examined the question. "I guess I'm mostly scared. What if nobody likes it? What if I'm just not good enough?" Thomas felt a sharp pang of recognition. He too had battled the demons of inadequacy in his own professional life, standing at the threshold of every important meeting with anxiety gnawing at his confidence. "It's possible you might face rejection," he said carefully, "but that doesn't diminish what you create. It's part of being an artist." "What would you know about being an artist?" she countered, her defensiveness returning. "I know about facing fear head-on," he replied, feeling the urge to share his own experiences. "Every launch I oversaw was riddled with risks. But it was through those moments of vulnerability that I learned who I truly was." For a heartbeat, Lily seemed to consider this. "So, what about you? Is being a successful businessman really all that matters to you?" Her question burrowed deep into his psyche. The pursuit of wealth had often felt like an insatiable hunger, leading to perceived achievements yet devoid of fulfillment. Here he stood, before the one person who could make him face that truth. "I used to think it was everything," he admitted, "but I'm beginning to realize I've missed out on connections and experiences that hold more meaning than numbers." Lily tilted her head as if assessing the genuineness of his confession. "You mean you care now?" It was a simple question, but the weight behind it staggered him. He had been so preoccupied with relocation and calculations, but he knew he needed to pursue this path without quantifying everything. "Yeah," he said more firmly, "I do care. I want to be part of your life in ways that count. So, how about we work on this show together? Let me help you, not as a businessman, but as your dad who wants to see you shine." A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, but it was accompanied by a spark of something else, a glimmer of hope. "You think you can really just help without wanting something in return?" He nodded, realizing how hard it was to give without conditions, to simply be present. "I want you to feel proud of your work, to explore freely without worrying about my expectations." Lily considered his words, a rare vulnerability softening her features. "Okay," she whispered, "let's try." That single decision ignited something within Thomas, a shift towards a life of collaboration rather than competition. As they began discussing the details of the showcase, he felt a heaviness dissipate, the approval he'd sought from the world becoming less essential in light of his daughter's validation. However, lingering in the back of his mind was the tendril of doubt. Would his change be enough to heal the fractures of their past? Later that week, Thomas found himself back in the boardroom, where the dynamic felt increasingly distant from the connection he shared with Lily. The conversation flowed around quarterly goals and profit margins, yet his heart lingered on the art fair preparations. "Thomas?" His COO's voice snapped him back to reality. "Are you still with us?" "Sorry, I was just thinking—" He searched for candor amidst the numbers. "What does it all mean if we can't foster creativity within our company culture?" The room fell silent. Eyes shifted, and the subtle tension crackled in the air. The moment of clarity arrived. He needed to embrace personal authenticity across all facets of his life. But was he prepared to face the repercussions? As the meeting shifted back to mundane operations, Thomas felt an undercurrent of anticipation. The path he was forging was uncertain and fraught with potential rejection, yet he'd never felt more alive. With every decision now rooted in connection rather than the sterile metrics of success, Thomas knew something pivotal was brewing. The art of business, he realized, wasn't just about the bottom line. It hinged upon relationships, authenticity, and the messy tapestry of human experience. As he left the building, a new sense of purpose coursed through him. But looming in his mind was a more pressing crisis. Was he prepared for the conversation lingering on the horizon, the one he would have to truly earn back Lily's trust? He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the unknown as he navigated towards his car. The stakes had never been higher. The unfolding of a new chapter lay ahead. Would they emerge stronger, or would the ghosts of the past overshadow their strides toward intimacy? Thomas barely made it through the front door of his home before his mind began racing with the possibilities that lay beyond the surface of his decision to support Lily. The gravity of what he promised lingered about him like an unshakable shadow, gnawing at the edges of his resolve. He had unshackled himself from the constraints of business expectations, and yet doubts clung to him like a wet coat. What if he failed to truly connect with Lily? What if his attempts to uplift her only reminded her of the distance they'd traveled? The thought rattled him, setting off a cascade of insecurities. As dusk settled, he sat in the living room, shadows dancing on walls that were too quiet. He closed his eyes, imagining the vibrant life of Lily's artwork. The raw, exposed emotions flowed through every stroke of paint. This was her voice, one he'd struggled to hear for so long. He needed to be as tangible in her struggle as the very paint on her canvases. When morning broke, he resolved to embrace a more active role. Thomas researched art techniques online, desperately pulling resources together as if preparing for a crucial business meeting. Each new skill he learned felt like a stepping stone toward reconciling the fragments of his past actions. He envisioned not just being there for the art show, but understanding the nuances of what Lily poured into her work. Determined, he approached Lily's room that afternoon, the canvas organized and brightened by the sun filtering through her window. She was anxious, her hands repeatedly wiping paint from her forehead. He cleared his throat quietly, afraid to disrupt the process. "Hey, can I help?" he asked, standing on the threshold. Lily's eyes, a careful blend of wariness and curiosity, met his. "You really want to? You don't have to, you know." "I know," he replied, pushing through the taut moment, "but I want to help." She hesitated before handing him a brush, uncertainty flickering across her face. As they painted side by side, small bursts of laughter punctuated the silence. At first, Thomas struggled with the coordination, each stroke feeling foreign and awkward in his hands. But slowly, under Lily's watchful eye, he began to find a rhythm. However, a question nagged at him, one he should have asked long ago. "Why do you paint?" She paused, brush hovering above the canvas. "It's complicated. It's how I process everything. Sometimes there are feelings I can't put into words." Thomas felt a lump form in his throat. His heart tightened with unshed regret. In pursuit of material success, he failed to see the depths of her emotion and experience. "I get that," he admitted quietly. "I think I've been chasing something I never even wanted. What I really want now is to connect with you. I'm learning that this means more than I realized." Her gaze softened, as if peering through the fog of uncertainty that had clouded their relationship for far too long. Just as they began to share moments of joy, the doorbell rang unexpectedly, breaking their fragile cocoon. Thomas glanced at Lily, whose expression shifted back to unease. "Should we ignore it?" she asked tentatively. "No," Thomas replied, barely aware of what was coming. "Let's face it together." As he opened the door, he found the nanny standing there, a clipboard in hand, a concerned expression on her face. "I hope I'm not interrupting, but we need to talk. It's about Lily's health." The world around him faded in an instant, his pulse quickening. "What do you mean?" Before she could respond, Thomas felt the ground shift beneath him. Doubts flared once more, threatening to engulf the fragile connection he had started to cultivate with Lily. Would the revelation of truth change everything? He turned back to Lily, who had stepped closer, worry painting her features. This was it, a moment that could unravel his attempts at healing or fortify the bond they were starting to forge. "Lily," he began, feeling the weight of multiple possibilities heavy on his chest. But just as he opened his mouth, the weight of expectation coiled around him like an unseen force, making it hard to breathe. In the delicate balance of this crucial juncture, he questioned whether he could find the strength to confront the evolving narrative of their lives, and whether he had the capacity to embrace vulnerability while navigating yet another storm. This moment held promise, but also peril. As a wall of uncertainty closed in, he wondered which path lay ahead. Would this be a fortification of their trust, or a fracture exposing old wounds? The tension in the room hung thick, as if all the emotions that Thomas had surging within him were manifesting in the very air they breathed. He turned to the nanny, momentarily frozen in indecision, caught between the fear of looming truth and the need to protect what he was beginning to rebuild with Lily. "What do you need to tell us?" he finally managed to ask, his voice steady but quieter than he intended, afraid to unleash chaos upon the tentative bond they were feverishly trying to establish. The nanny shifted her weight uneasily, her clipboard clutched tightly in her hands. "It's about Lily," she began, her gaze flitting between Thomas and Lily. Her health check revealed some concerns. Thomas felt a rush of annoyance at the interruption of their progress. How could this be happening now, when they were barely making strides in understanding each other? But deep down, he recognized that they could not allow themselves to be consumed by the past. This was yet another obstacle to overcome. "Can we address it later?" he interjected, feeling the knot in his stomach tighten. "Thomas, I think it's important," the nanny insisted, her voice firm but gentle. "It's about her emotional state as much as her physical health. She's been under a lot of pressure." His gaze fell back on Lily, who had retreated slightly, as if instinctively shielding herself from the oncoming waves of concern that were crashing against them. It cut him deeply, realizing that his attempts to build a bridge had been dashed moments before they could truly connect. "Lily, it's all right," he said softly, willing to embrace vulnerability if it meant helping her face what lay ahead. She started, but the words fell into silence, tangled in the rawness of the moment. Suddenly, the weight of doubt settled over him once more. Had he misjudged her readiness to confront her feelings? The cacophony of inner disbelief met the desire to nurture, mixing into a potent cocktail of anxiety. Thomas clenched his fists, realizing that he was being forced to confront his own fears. Fear of failure in support, fear of losing Lily to circumstances beyond their control. He had spent so long ignoring the emotional realities that surrounded them. It was finally time to face those shadows lurking within their lives. "Why do you think she's under pressure?" he asked, shifting his focus onto the nanny, trying to wear a mask of calm determination. The nanny inhaled deeply. "She hasn't been able to express her feelings fully, Thomas. I've seen her struggling to reconcile her emotions with the expectations of performance, her artistry mixed with personal turmoil. It's affecting her mental health." His heart sank as he thought of all the moments they had shared, the shy laughter, the brush strokes. He hadn't fully grasped the weight of her artistic pursuits, hadn't acknowledged the meticulous balance she maintained between her internal world and the outward expectations. In many ways, it mirrored his own experiences in the business world. The constant pressure to be the best had led him down a dark path. But now was not the time to wallow in regret. It was a moment for action. He locked eyes with Lily, whose expression flickered between vulnerability and defiance, that same fierce spirit of hers refusing to be extinguished. "Lily, we can work through this together," he reassured, feeling his own resolve hardening, transforming into a shield against the potential storm. "Even if I don't know how," she replied, uncertainty threading through her voice, "especially because we don't know how. We are discovering each other, and we'll do it one brushstroke at a time," he said earnestly, allowing his sincerity to shine through. The door was open for a conversation that went beyond mere words or paintings. They stood on the precipice, ready to create anew. However, in that same breath, fear cradled the corners of his mind. Could he truly be the ally she needed amidst her tumultuous emotions? A flicker of anguish surfaced at the idea of failing once more. This was only the beginning. As if on cue, the nanny glanced at her clipboard again. "There's one more detail I haven't shared, and it's crucial." Thomas's heart raced anew, knowing that the next revelation could irrevocably change everything. Would they be ready for the truth? Would it bring them closer, or would they be torn apart by the weight of what was yet to come? "Tell me," he said, bracing himself for impact, wondering what new shadows awaited them in the art of healing. The air in the room felt charged, pulsing with unspoken fears and half-formed hopes. As Thomas braced himself for the nanny's revelation, he couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. He had been trying to foster a safe space for Lily, and now uncertainty threatened to shatter the fragile structure they were just beginning to build. "Lily's been exhibiting signs of anxiety," the nanny continued, a note of urgency threading through her voice. "She's become withdrawn, and her art has taken a darker turn. It's like she's searching for something, but she hasn't found a way to express what's inside her." Each word struck Thomas with the force of a physical blow. The urgency of the situation pierced through his walls of denial. He had assumed time, love, and laughter would heal Lily's wounds, but he had underestimated the complexity of her emotional landscape. It wouldn't be easy, but he recognized that this was an opportunity to guide her, to support her, to ensure that she didn't feel her struggles alone. "What can we do?" he asked, his voice rising slightly, a blend of desperation and determination. He looked back at Lily, catching the fleeting interplay of fear and frustration on her face. She was standing on the edge, just as he had felt throughout his professional life, always needing to perform while battling unseen battles within. "We need to open up the lines of communication," the nanny suggested, her tone softening. "Lily needs to know that it's okay to share her feelings. She also needs to understand that she's not solely defined by her art. It's important to cultivate a safe environment for her to express herself." The notion struck deep within him. He understood the power of expression. He had always had to be the confident businessman, the strategic player, burying his vulnerability beneath layers of success and stoicism. But now, bearing witness to his daughter's struggle, he had to confront the truths he had refused to acknowledge in his own life. "Lily," he said, turning back to her, "I want to try something. If you're willing, let's take some time each day to talk. About anything. We can draw, paint, or just sit together if that's what you want. No expectations. Just a safe space." Her brow creased as she processed his words. The vulnerability in her eyes mirrored his. But what if I don't know what to say? Then we'll figure it out together, he replied, allowing his sincerity to cut through the tension. Let's make it our own private adventure, something that's just between us. He could see the semblance of a spark ignite in her eyes, and though uncertainty still clouded her expression, Thomas knew they were taking their first step toward healing. He had learned, through years of navigating the corporate world, that real connections thrived on honesty and creativity. Perhaps, through their exploration, he could finally break beyond the walls he had constructed around himself. As the two began to envision their new routine together, something unexpected dawned on Thomas. He was not just trying to be an emotional anchor for Lily. He was rediscovering pieces of himself he thought he had lost. In that moment, he realized he needed this just as much as she did. The path to her healing might also illuminate his own. Before he could fully process this revelation, the nanny interjected again, her concern evident. "Thomas, there's one more thing." The gravity of her words echoed ominously in his mind. Just when it felt like they were making progress, another revelation loomed on the horizon. What was it this time? Would it deepen their bond, or drive an even bigger wedge between them? "Go on," he urged again, forcing himself to remain steady. As they moved toward the truth, he braced for whatever lay ahead, knowing the outcome might change everything they had worked to recover. Thomas felt an anxious knot tightening in his stomach as he anticipatively awaited the nanny's next words. She held the power to either deepen his understanding of Lily's struggles or introduce new fears altogether. The air thickened with tension, each passing second stretching into a lifetime. "The signs are concerning, and I don't want to alarm you," she began cautiously, "but I think it's important to consider that there may be more at play." Her eyes searched Thomas's face for reassuring acknowledgement. "Have you considered that there might be something happening in her life that she's too hesitant to disclose?" As the enormity of the question loomed, Thomas's mind raced, replaying the interactions he'd observed between Lily and others. He could sense the unsettling truth behind her evasive glances. "Are you suggesting?" he started, but the words stuck in his throat like a lump of uncertainty. "Yes," she cut in gently, as if she could read the turmoil etched across his features. "Kids can have experiences that profoundly shape their perceptions, sometimes things that you wouldn't even know about unless they disclose them. With her art becoming darker, it indicates that there's something unresolved, a source of pain or confusion." His heart raced. This wasn't just about his daughter's anxiety. This could reveal vulnerabilities in her life he had yet to confront. "What do you suggest I do?" he asked, the earlier resolve in his voice punctured by doubt. "You have to engage with her directly," the nanny advised, her tone firm but compassionate. "Open the door to every possibility of conversation, but also watch her closely. Sometimes it's in the silence that the most powerful messages lie. What she might say, her fears, her perceptions, could unveil deeper truths." Thomas nodded, fighting against a wave of guilt that crashed over him. Had he been present enough in her life to notice these subtleties, or had he been too absorbed in his own ambitions? This wasn't the time for self-reproach. It was an opportunity for transformation, both for himself and for Lily. As the nanny's warning sank in, clarity began to crystallize. He realized his past success couldn't shield him from the challenges of parenting. He would need to abandon the idea of control and embrace a collaborative spirit with Lily to foster communication and healing. "How do I bridge that gap?" he asked, feeling a mixture of fear and burgeoning determination. "I've always been the one following plans. Now, holding space for her emotions feels alien." "Start with your vulnerability," she replied softly. "Share your own experiences. Let her see that it's okay to struggle, that even grown-ups face hardships. You might be surprised by how that opens her up." The suggestion resonated, igniting a flicker of courage within him. For years, Thomas had operated behind a facade of perfect control, and accepting vulnerability felt like the first step toward real connection. What had he been so afraid of showing? That he wasn't a flawless father? A successful businessman? Perhaps, in presenting his true self, he might grant Lily permission to do the same. The nanny's presence faded as Thomas began to form a plan in his mind. He would create a ritual of honesty, a space where they could share fears and dreams freely. As he envisioned their shared moments of reflection, the familiar weight of hesitation began to lift. A grounding sense of purpose enveloped him instead, shaping this challenge into an unprecedented opportunity for learning and growth. But just as he was formulating a strategy, darkness passed over his thoughts. A troubling image broke the peace within him. What if he uncovered truths that shattered the bond he had worked so hard to strengthen? He took a deep breath, welcoming the complexity of the journey ahead. The path to healing was never straightforward, and every revelation could bring light or dark. Little did Thomas know, the next step he took would demand more of him than he ever anticipated. As he prepared to confront the unknown, a new realization settled into the crevices of his mind. Perhaps facing his own fears was the only way to truly help Lily confront hers. The resolve within him thrummed dangerously against the mounting dread, leaving him at a precipice he didn't know he would have to leap from. The moment of truth had arrived, and he was forced to make a choice. Would he shield his daughter from the struggles of life, or would he risk revealing the very essence of his own vulnerabilities to save her? Thomas stood before the door to Lily's room, the weight of impending conversations pressing on his chest like a weighty stone. He had spent years cloistered in the armor of wealth, fighting the external battles of success while neglecting the internal storms brewing within himself and his daughter. Today, he was determined to break free from that cycle. "Lily," he called softly, opening the door just a fraction. "Can we talk?" The cautious expression on her face met him like an electric current. "About what?" "About everything," he replied, stepping into the room where creativity collided with chaos, canvases splashed with half-formed thoughts and feelings. "Can we start with your art?" Lily nibbled at her lip, resisting the pull of vulnerability, but recognizing the sincerity of his intention. Each brushstroke had been a part of her, a canvas through which she expressed the joy and pain that spiraled within. "You know I've never been good at sharing my feelings," she said, bitterness creeping into her voice. "I've never been good at listening," Thomas admitted, surprising even himself with his raw honesty. "And I haven't made it easy for you to trust that you'll be heard. I want to change that." Mirroring her defensive posture, he crossed his arms, ready to embrace the uncomfortable. "I met with Gina, as you know, and I learned something vital. We both have been trying to navigate feelings on our own, without the other. I want to open that door." "Why now?" she challenged, voice rising slightly. "You've spent years ignoring what I care about, and now—" "Because I see you," he interrupted, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. "I see the struggles you face and the isolation that comes with pursuing your art. And I want to tell you that it's okay to express what's in your heart. It's okay to feel." Her eyes flashed with surprise, enduring years of emotional detachment. "But how do I know that you mean it?" "Because I'm here now. I'm willing to do the work," he said firmly. "Not just as your father, but as someone who's learning how to be vulnerable. I've been fighting my own battles. Business success and financial gain turned into a shield that distanced me from love. I don't want that anymore, and I don't want you to feel that distance either." In that moment, something unspooled within their fragile connection. Hesitation melted when Lily met his gaze, the storm of emotions between them sparking a recognition that each had been seeking. "Why don't we start with something simple?" Thomas suggested gently. "Can we talk about your work? Can you tell me what you see in those canvases?" As she looked away, the whispers of uncertainty flickered in her eyes, yet beneath it was the glimmer of trust, the profound belief that they were on the precipice of something transformative. "It's a way to let go," she began hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. To understand my feelings when I can't form the words to say them. He nodded, his heart swelling at her honesty. I want to be part of that process. Let's make it a project we can explore together. Together? She hesitated, processing the enormity of sharing her art and her emotional journey. You really mean that? Absolutely, he proclaimed, and an exhilarating thrill coursed through him, igniting a passion within that he thought was extinguished long ago. Let it be a safe space where we can paint, talk, or even just sit in silence if that's what you want. No expectations, just presence. As uncertainty danced in her features, Lily struggled between fear and hope. Yet for the first time, she could feel the cords of trust stitch through the distance that had divided them for too long. I don't know how it'll go, she confessed softly, but I'd like to try. Then we will try, he affirmed, the words ringing of authenticity for the first time. One stroke at a time. Over the following days, their dynamic shifted. They spread canvases across the living room floor, and as they painted together, emotions poured forth like colors. Laughter mingled with small silences that held profound understanding. They exchanged stories, secrets, and even tears as they bridged the chasms with brushes and palettes, each meaningful stroke revealing more of their complex selves than they had dared acknowledge. Through this shared experience, Thomas discovered the art of being present. He stepped into the unknown, letting go of notions of control while embracing vulnerability. He was learning alongside Lily, breaking new ground in both their lives. And then the day of the art showcase arrived. The walls of the gallery glimmered with anticipation as patrons gathered to celebrate each artist's journey. Thomas stood with Lily, holding her hand with pride, sharing in the nerve-wracking excitement that pulsed through the air. Are you ready? He asked softly, looking down at her, who gazed at the space filled with onlookers admiring her work. Kind of, she replied, her voice a mix of eagerness and trepidation. What if they don't get it? Thomas smiled, warmth enveloping him. It doesn't matter if they get it or not. What matters is that you expressed yourself, and that's an accomplishment in itself. As the doors opened, Lily took a deep breath and stepped into the spotlight, a radiant beam of light illuminating her. The attentive murmur of art enthusiasts enveloped them, but to her it felt like symphony notes floating in the air, the culmination of hard work, expression, and healing. In that moment, Thomas felt a tidal wave of pride wash over him. He had not only supported Lily, but had transformed as well. He was no longer just the billionaire in a corner office. Now he was a devoted father who understood the challenges of life, not only as an artist, but as a person navigating turmoil and trauma. And in that circle of vulnerability, an epiphany struck him. He had uncovered more than riches. He had regained his daughter's trust, a priceless connection that fulfilled both their lives. As the evening progressed, conversations flowed around them, art blossomed, and laughter pulled them closer together. They were no longer two distant figures lost in their ambitions. They were a united front, exploring the depth of their bond. Walking home after the event, side by side, Thomas realized he had achieved something beyond wealth. He had conquered his greatest fears and insecurities, stepping into a newly established position as a confidant to his daughter, a place he was proud to inhabit. In the quietude of the night, Thomas turned to Lily. I'm proud of you. You're an incredible artist. Thanks, Dad. I'm proud of us, for trying. She smiled, the sincerity igniting a warmth that filled the spaces once occupied by silence. As they settled back into the rhythm of their lives, the past cast no shadows over their connection. Thomas knew the journey ahead required continued effort and commitment, but an undeniable truth had emerged. This was a victory rooted in vulnerability and shared experiences. For the first time, he stepped into the fullness of life, connecting meaningfully with those he loved. And so, in the vibrant realm of human experience, both father and daughter embraced the beautiful messiness of life, knowing it was this emotional tapestry that would ultimately lead to their most fulfilling existence. Now is your moment to be part of uplifting stories like this. You need to subscribe now to witness exclusive experiences that harness true emotional journeys. Leave a like to keep this content alive and let the algorithm know how special these tales are. Comment below with your reactions or ideas. Your voice is vital in shaping these narratives. And don't wait. Even one more second. Share this video with 5 friends who need to see the power of personal growth. Remember, only true fans understand how pivotal your support is in amplifying heartfelt stories.